the most common hesitation and objection as to why more sellers aren't taking advantage of the seller's market. Honestly, the reason, in my opinion, why inventory is so low, it's because anyone that's going to be purchasing next does not want to be a buyer in this market. They want to sell, they want to take the equity out. Yay, they'll make some money or a lot of money, depending. But then if they're gonna buy next, they're gonna take all the equity out of their home and potentially dump it right into the next. Maybe not all of it, and then they have to, they know they're gonna be outbid on multiple occasions in some cases, depending on where they're going. So people say, forget it, I'm just gonna stay. So, the questions come. What if my house sells fast? Which it will. I don't want to be homeless. What if I have to sell first in order to buy? If houses are selling in 6 days, but it takes the buyer an average of 3 months to find a house, then what do I do? So these are all excellent questions that we're going to go over and find solutions for. So if you already have a second home that you plan to go to after you sell, or if the house you're selling is already vacant, or you plan to rent an apartment, or you already have somewhere to go after you sell, then you can take a quick break here. This slide may not pertain to you. It really just depends on the people who have to buy first. Okay. So here's the question. What's first? So sell my home first or buy the next house and then list my current home. And ultimately the answer will depend on your finances. So if you sell first, that means you cannot carry 2 mortgages, or you need the cash from the sale of your first home in order to put the down payment that you want, or the closing costs that you have to put down on the purchase of the next. So the pros to this option is having increased cash available improves your ability to compete when buying. When sellers are looking at 10 offers, they are going to look to see how much each buyer is putting down. The more money they have to put down, the higher, or the stronger, I should say, of a buyer they see. So somebody that's only putting 3% down seems like less strong of a buyer than someone putting 20% down or more. So these are all things that the seller is looking at when, if offers in terms of price are the rest the same. So they're not just looking at price, they're looking at terms and qualifications as well. Another pro to this option is no risk of carrying 2 mortgages. There are, of course, some major implications of this option, unfortunately. A home sale contingency will make it nearly impossible to be successful when buying. So if you're competing with 10 offers and 9 of them are non-contingent, which means they don't need to sell a home before they buy the next, then you will lose with a normally reasonable offer. Or you have to maybe even throw ridiculous terms to favor the seller in order for them to consider taking on the risk of a contingent offer. Because essentially your offer is contingent upon how strong your buyer is for your house. Because everybody knows if the house that you're selling is priced well enough, reasonable enough, you're not listing it for some ridiculous number, then it's a seller's market. You're going to be able to sell it quickly. However, now the sale of this person's home that you're buying is contingent upon how strong the buyer is for your house, and they don't know that. So it's an additional risk that some are willing to take on, but you have to throw other favorable terms at the seller in order to consider them taking on that risk. So you may have to go well over the asking price. You may waive a certain amount of home inspection repair costs. You may come up with the difference if it doesn't appraise, which we'll talk a little more about in a second. So if on the off chance that we can get a seller to accept our contingent offer, we have to coordinate with the buyer on your house and the seller on your next house that you close on the same day, which essentially means all of your belongings go into a moving van the day before closing. You may even stay at a hotel the night before, or air mattresses in your house that doesn't have any furniture in it. And then again, your belongings stay in the moving van. The morning of closing, you go to the title company and sign the papers for the sale of your home. And then you take that proceeds of sale check right over to the closing of your next house. And to put it bluntly, I hate to say this, but bluntly, for a brief moment between the sale of your house and the buy of your next house, which can only be maybe an hour in between, you are homeless. And that obviously scares a lot of people. So that's where I'm saying it can be a little stressful, and makes people a little uneasy, hence the forewarning that doing it this way can add a little stress. However, we do everything in our power to ensure that there are no hiccups. Prior to this market, this was a very typical practice. It often went on without a hitch. And I will say in the last, pretty much since 2020, for a long time, contingent offers were impossible. And they're happening a little bit more. I had one get accepted in October. That was basically my first one in 2 years. But there, caveat to that, there was a little bit of a lull. October and November was a little slower. Inventory had picked up a little bit and demand went down a little bit. Once December hit, though, everything went back to the way it was. Low inventory and a ton of buyers. Okay, I'm just letting my lender's going to jump on because we're going to finish this slide up and then he's going to give his piece. Okay, so we will have to find you temporary housing and move twice, which is not ideal. That's another con. Realistically, though, we will be unable to get a contingent offer accepted, and instead, I would encourage you to come up with a plan B. So either you plan to sell the home and stay with family or friends until you find and make settlement, or we can help you find a short-term rental in the interim. Of course, in this scenario, you would have to move twice, potentially pay additional money for temporary housing and a storage unit. But again, this can be less stressful, less pressure than buying and selling in the same day. So, of course, the more appealing option here is to find the next home and then sell your current one. But you, of course, have to be in a financial position to do so. There are a few pros to this option. It eliminates the hassle of finding temporary housing and moving twice, or the stress and risk of selling and buying in the same day. You will be able to just vacate your home before any pre-listing prep work begins. You won't have to coordinate the family, the pets around showings once it hits the market, and you'll just go onto your new home and not have to worry about it. You have the ability to choose which option works for you. Maybe you do still want to sell then buy, in the same day, but you have that choice if you want to or not. The con here, which I did not jot down here, but the biggest con is not being able to use the proceeds of sale as a down payment on your new home. However, you have the option down the road to refinance and take care of that after the sale is complete. One thing that is important to know, if you do fall into the category of having to sell first, there's a very popular option right now called a rent back, which means you list your home, you find a buyer that doesn't need to move into the home right away. You close on the home, so you make settlement within the 30 to 45 day mark, and the buyer allows you to essentially rent the home from them until you find suitable housing. Typically, there's a security deposit and a per diem or a monthly rent payment that's associated with this option that you do pay the buyer at closing or after closing, but you no longer paying your mortgage payment or taxes. So it's a popular solution, honestly, for buyers and sellers. So yeah, there's a few choices here. Okay, so in conclusion, an experienced lender can work with you to best understand your financial situation, to determine if you're able to and comfortable with buying